Investigation into in-vehicle transmission pump shaft replacement for 1997 Ford Taurus 3.0L Vulcan engine. 1. Executive summary. This report investigates the feasibility of replacing the transmission pump shaft on a 1997 Ford Taurus equipped with a 3.0L Vulcan engine without removing the engine and transmission assembly. The analysis indicates that this procedure is often achievable, particularly when the underlying cause is related to the common failure of the torque converter splines. This approach offers a potentially significant cost saving compared to the extensive quote provided by a local transmission shop. However, proper diagnosis is crucial to confirm that the pump shaft is indeed the primary issue and to assess the condition of related components, such as the torque converter. 2. Vehicle and transmission identification. 2.1. Primary transmission model. The X4 and the automatic transmission predominantly found in the 1997 Ford Taurus with a 3.0L engine, including the OHV Vulcan variant, is identified as the AX4 N.1. This information is crucial as the replacement procedure and parts will be specific to this transmission model. While the snippet also mentions the 3.0L DOHC engine paired with the AX4N, the user's explicit reference to the Vulcan engine narrows the focus. Further supporting this, research indicates that the third-generation Ford Taurus, which encompasses the 1997 model year, utilized the 4-speed X4N automatic transmission alongside the 3.0L Vulcan SFI V6 engine. 2. This confirms the likely transmission in question. 2.2. Potential secondary transmission model. The X4S. It is important to note that the 1997 Ford Taurus could also be equipped with an X4S automatic transmission. 3. This possibility is highlighted by listings of used transmissions and parts for 1996 to 1997 Mercury Sables and 1997 Ford Tauruses with a 3.0L OHV. Vulcan engine identified as AX4S. For the Sable, being a closely related model, often shares powertrain components with the Taurus. The existence of both the X4N and the X4S options necessitates careful identification of the specific transmission in the user's vehicle before proceeding with any repair. 2.3. Submodel variations and engine/transmission pairing. Different trim levels of the 1997 Ford Taurus might have influenced the specific transmission installed. One source suggests that the SE model likely featured the Vulcan engine, while the SEL trim was equipped with the Duratec engine, and that these engines were paired with different transmissions. 6. The 8th digit of the vehicle identification number, VIN, can be used to confirm the engine type, which can indirectly help in identifying the transmission. Examining the trim specifications for the 1997 Taurus reveals that the G and GL trims, both likely to house the 3.0 LV6 engine producing 145 horsepower and 170 lb-ft of torque, characteristics of the Vulcan engine, were equipped with a 4-speed automatic transmission with overdrive. 7. The LX trim, featuring a more powerful 3.0 LV6, 200 HP, 200 ft-lbs, also used a 4-speed automatic transmission. 7. While these specifications confirm the presence of a 4-speed automatic transmission across various trims with 3.0L engines, they do not definitively distinguish between the X4N and the X4S models for the Vulcan power trims. Both transmission types were indeed options for the third-generation Taurus. 2. Therefore, the mechanic will need to physically inspect the transmission to confirm the exact model. To provide a clear understanding of the potential transmission models based on the 1997 Ford Taurus trim levels and engine options, the following table summarizes the findings. Trim level engine likely transmission S G 3.0L Vulcan V6 145 HP, X4 SGL 3.0L Vulcan V6 145 HP, X4S, X4 NLX 3.0L Duratec V6 200 HP, X4 NSHO 3.4L SHO V8 235 HP, X4N. 3.1. Function of the transmission pump. The transmission pump is a vital component in an automatic transmission system. Its primary function is to generate the necessary hydraulic pressure and fluid flow required for various operations, including gear changes, lubrication of internal components, and cooling. 10. The pump, typically located at the front of the transmission, is driven by the torque converter as the engine runs. This mechanical link ensures that fluid pressure is available whenever the engine is operating. 3.2. Common issue. Pump shaft spline failure. A frequent problem encountered in Ford Taurus models of a similar vintage involves the torque converter and its interaction with the transmission pump. Specifically, the splines on the torque converter that engage with the transmission pump shaft are prone to wear or stripping. 11. When these splines fail, the torque converter can no longer effectively drive the pump, leading to a loss of hydraulic pressure and, consequently, a failure of the transmission to engage in any gear. In some instances, this failure mode can also damage the transmission pump shaft itself, either by stripping its splines or causing it to break. 14. Mechanics and owners have noted the necessity of replacing both the torque converter and the pump shaft when this issue arises. 14. Even if the pump shaft appears visually intact, there might be underlying where that could lead to future problems. 17. The prevalence of this issue suggests that the user's inquiry about a broken or stripped pump shaft is well-founded and aligns with known failure patterns in these vehicles. For point 1, evidence supporting feasibility based on available information, replacing the transmission pump shaft on a 1997 Ford Taurus without a complete engine and transmission removal is indeed a feasible shortcut, especially when coupled with the replacement of the torque converter. A video resource describes this procedure as pretty much non-invasive, indicating that it does not require extensive dismantling of the transmission itself. 16. This approach typically involves removing the torque converter to gain access to the pump shaft, which can then be extracted and replaced. 4.2. Lack of direct step-by-step guides for full pump replacement. It is important to distinguish between replacing the entire transmission pump and just the pump shaft. Replacing the complete pump assembly generally necessitates the removal of the transmission from the vehicle to allow proper access. 10. However, the user's specific question focuses on the pump shaft, which, as the aforementioned video suggests, can often be accessed and replaced once the torque converter is removed. 4.3. Focus on torque converter and pump shaft together. The recurring emphasis on addressing the torque converter in conjunction with the pump shaft replacement highlights the interconnected nature of these components in the failure. The worn or stripped splines on the torque converter are frequently the root cause of the pump shaft issue. Therefore, a repair focused solely on the pump shaft without addressing the torque converter's condition would likely be incomplete and could lead to a rapid recurrence of the problem. 5.1. Preliminary steps. 1. Safely elevate the vehicle using a jack and secure it with jack stands. Ensure the vehicle is stable before proceeding. 2. Disconnect the negative battery terminal to prevent any electrical shorts. 3. Remove the air intake assembly and the battery tray to provide better access to the transmission area. This might involve loosening clamps and disconnecting sensors. 4. Locate the transmission pan and place a drain pan underneath. Remove the transmission pan bolts and allow the transmission fluid to drain completely. 195. Once the fluid is drained, remove the transmission pan and the filter carefully. Inspect the inside of the pan for any significant amount of metal debris, which could indicate severe internal transmission damage beyond a simple pump shaft issue. 6. Remove any splash shields or lower engine covers that might obstruct access to the torque converter and the front of the transmission. 5.2. Torque converter removal. 1. Locate the access cover on the lower part of the engine's bell housing. Remove this cover to expose the bolts that connect the torque converter to the engine's flex plate. 2. Using a wrench or socket, remove these bolts one by one. It will be necessary to rotate the engine to access all the bolts. This can usually be done by hand or by using a breaker bar on the crankshaft pulley bolt. 3. Once all the bolts are removed, carefully slide the torque converter forward and out of the transmission bell housing. Be prepared for some residual transmission fluid to spill. 20. 5.3. Accessing and replacing the pump shaft. 1. With the torque converter removed, the transmission pump shaft should be visible protruding from the center of the transmission pump. Point 2. Gently grasp the old pump shaft and pull it straight out of the transmission. Point 3. Thoroughly inspect the removed shaft for any signs of wear, damage, or stripped splines, particularly on the end that engages with the torque converter. Point 4. Obtain a new transmission pump shaft. It is recommended to use a new shaft even if the old one appears to be in good condition due to the possibility of unseen fatigue or minor wear. Point 165. The new pump shaft will likely require the installation of new seals. One source mentions 2 scarf cut seals from Ford and a new converter hub seal. Point 16. Ensure these seals are correctly positioned on the new shaft before installation. Point 6. Lubricate the new pump shaft and its seals with fresh, clean automatic transmission fluid. Point 7. Carefully slide the new pump shaft into the transmission pump, ensuring it is fully seated and aligned correctly. 5.4. Torque converter installation. 1. Lubricate the snout and seals of the torque converter with new automatic transmission fluid. Point 2. Align the torque converter with the transmission input shaft and carefully slide it back into the bell housing. Ensure that the torque converter is fully seated and engages correctly with the newly installed pump shaft. The torque converter should rotate freely by hand once properly in place. 203. Reinstall the bolts that connect the torque converter to the engine's flex plate. Tighten these bolts to the manufacturer's specified torque. 5.5. Final steps. 1. Install a new transmission filter, ensuring the correct type for the vehicles. Transmission model, EX4N or EX4S. Install a new transmission pan gasket. Point 2. Reinstall the transmission pan and tighten the pan bolts to the manufacturer's specified torque. Point 3. Refill the transmission with the correct type and amount of new automatic transmission fluid. For a 1997 Ford Taurus, Merc On V is often recommended, but it is crucial to verify the exact specification in the vehicle's owner's manual or a reliable service manual. 184. Reconnect the negative battery terminal. Point 5. Start the engine and allow it to idle for a few minutes. Point 6. With the engine running, check the transmission fluid level using the dipstick. Add more fluid as needed to reach the correct level, following the procedure outlined in the owner's manual, typically checked with the engine running and the transmission in park or neutral after cycling through all the gears. 237. Thoroughly inspect the transmission pan and the area around the torque converter for any signs of fluid leaks. 5.6. Importance of inspecting the torque converter. Before reinstalling the torque converter, carefully inspect its splines that engage with the pump shaft. If these splines are worn, damaged, or stripped, the torque converter must be replaced to ensure the longevity of the repair. Failure to replace a damaged torque converter will likely lead to a repeat failure of the pump shaft. 6.1. Standard automotive tools. Floor jack stand socket set, metric. Wrench set, metric. Torque wrench, pry bar, funnel transmission fluid drain pan. 6.2. Special tools, potentially. Torque converter holding tool may be helpful but not always necessary. Transmission fluid pump shaft seal installation tool, depending on the type of seals included with the new shaft. 6.3. Parts and materials. New transmission pump shaft, e.g., aftermarket part A86671125 or D86671126, verify correct part number for the specific transmission model. New torque converter, if needed, e.g., Proking FM7227 or Axode/AX4N/AX4S25 spline converter 28. Ford scarf cut seals for the pump shaft, verify correct part number. New converter hub seal, e.g., tri-component FO 25-1129. New transmission filter, verify correct part number, example FT13016 or Transtar. A86010H30. New transmission pan gasket, appropriate amount of new automatic transmission fluid, e.g., Merc On V. 7.1. Limited access. Performing this repair without removing the transmission means working in a somewhat confined space. Access to certain bolts and components might be restricted, requiring patience and careful maneuvering. While the procedure is described as non-invasive 16, the mechanic should be prepared for potentially awkward angles and tight spaces. 7.2. Proper seating of the pump shaft and torque converter. Ensuring that both the new pump shaft and the torque converter are correctly seated and aligned is critical. Improper installation can lead to immediate damage to the pump, torque converter, or other internal transmission components. Point 21. The torque converter should rotate freely once fully seated. 7.3. Potential for internal transmission damage. If the pump shaft failure is a symptom of a more significant internal transmission problem, such as worn clutches, bands, or other hard parts, simply replacing the shaft and possibly the torque converter might not resolve the underlying issue. Point 10. A thorough inspection of the drain fluid and removed components for excessive wear or metal shavings is essential to assess the overall condition of the transmission. 7.4. Torque converter condition. As previously emphasized, the condition of the torque converter's splines is paramount. If the original torque converter caused the pump shaft to fail, reusing it will inevitably lead to another failure. Replacing the torque converter is a highly recommended step in this type of repair. Point 12. 7.5. Identifying the correct transmission model. While the pump shaft appears to be compatible with both the AX4N and EX4S transmissions 25, it is still crucial for the mechanic to accurately identify the specific transmission model in the vehicle. This ensures that the correct filter and other related parts are used. The transmission model can often be found on a tag attached to the transmission case, or identified using the VIN. Point 6. 8.1. Estimated cost of shortcut. The cost of the transmission pump shaft itself is relatively modest, potentially around $75.25 if a new torque converter is also required. The price can range from approximately $75 to $380 or more, depending on the brand and quality. Point 27. Additional costs will include new transmission fluid, a filter, and seals. The total cost of parts for this shortcut procedure could realistically be several $100s, significantly less than the $2,000 plus quote at 8.2. Comparison to transmission shop quote. The transmission shop's quote of over $2,000 likely encompasses a more comprehensive repair, potentially including a rebuilt or new transmission pump assembly, a new torque converter, all necessary fluids and filters, and a substantial amount of labor for full transmission removal and reinstallation. 8.3. User's previous experience. The user's prior experience of replacing the entire transmission with a rebuilt unit for $200 plus $350 for the transmission demonstrates that more economical solutions exist outside of traditional transmission shop repairs. The pump shaft replacement shortcut aims to be an even more targeted and cost-effective approach if the diagnosis is accurate. 8.4. Labor cost. The labor involved in this in-vehicle pump shaft replacement should be considerably less than the labor required for full transmission removal and pump replacement, contributing significantly to the potential cost savings. 9.1. Feasibility summary. Replacing the transmission pump shaft on a 1997 Ford Taurus with a 3.0 L Vulcan engine without removing the entire transmission is a viable shortcut, especially when the issue stems from torque converter spline failure. This method can potentially save the vehicle owner a considerable amount of money. 9.2. Recommended first steps for the mechanic. 1. Confirm transmission model. The mechanic should first positively identify whether the vehicle is equipped with an EX4N or EX4S transmission. This can be done by locating the transmission identification tag or by checking the TR code on the vehicle's door jamb label. L indicates AX4S, X indicates AX4N. Point 322. Thorough diagnosis. A careful diagnosis is essential to confirm that the symptoms align with a pump shaft failure, potentially caused by a faulty torque converter. Simple tests for no engagement issues, as mentioned in some resources, can be helpful. Point 333. Inspect transmission fluid. The condition of the transmission fluid should be assessed for the presence of excessive metal debris, which could suggest more extensive internal transmission damage, requiring a different course of action. 9.3. Procedure recommendation. If the diagnosis indicates a likely pump shaft and or torque converter issue, the mechanic can proceed with the in-vehicle replacement procedure detailed in Section 5 of this report. 9.4. Emphasize torque converter replacement. It is strongly recommended that the mechanic thoroughly inspect the torque converter splines for any signs of wear or damage. Replacing the torque converter is often a necessary step in conjunction with the pump shaft replacement to prevent a recurrence of the failure. Point 12. 9.5. Caution regarding risks. The mechanic should be aware of the potential risks and complications associated with this type of in-vehicle repair, as outlined in Section 7. If there are indications of significant internal transmission damage, a more comprehensive approach involving transmission removal and inspection might be warranted. 9.6. Cost-benefit analysis. This shortcut procedure offers a significant potential cost saving compared to the quote from the transmission shop. However, the mechanic should ensure that the repair is performed correctly and that all contributing factors, such as a damaged torque converter, are addressed to achieve a lasting and effective repair. Works cited. 1. 1997 Ford Taurus automatic transmission, Car Part Planet, accessed April 22, 2025, https://carpartplanet.com/transmissions//Taurus/1997/automatic 6-183-3.0